She didn't belong at that table. And every single person in that room made sure she felt it. Amara Sade sat at the far edge of the reception hall, spine straight, hands folded, chin level, because pride was the one thing she refused to leave at home. The room glittered with money. Crystal glasses clinked. Laughter floated up to the chandeliers. Couples leaned into each other like the night was made for them. Families pulled each other close for photographs that would hang on walls for decades. No one pulled Amara close. When eyes passed over her, they didn't stop. She was background, decoration, as invisible as the flower arrangements and about as interesting to them. Amara had learned how to wear invisibility like armor. It kept people from asking questions she didn't have the energy to answer. It kept them from noticing the tiredness she carried in her shoulders. It kept them from noticing the way her mind always ran calculations: electric bill, groceries, school shoes, the next day's survival. Single mothers didn't get the luxury of choosing dignity over dollars, not when a last-minute wedding assist shift could buy breathing room. So she pressed her best green dress, put her natural hair into a clean, low twist, fixed her small gold earrings in the mirror while her daughter slept, kissed Zoe's forehead, promised she'd be back soon, and walked into a world that wasn't built for her. This was supposed to be simple. Work quiet, go home. Then the energy in the room shifted. It started small, the way a crack starts before glass shatters. A wedding planner's smile went stiff. A bridesmaid disappeared through a side door and didn't come back. Whispers moved from table to table like smoke under a closed door. And at the head table, long, impossibly perfect, draped in white roses and candlelight, one chair sat empty. Not briefly empty. Dangerously empty. In rooms full of money and reputation, and people whose worst fear was public embarrassment, an empty chair at the wrong moment was catastrophe. Phones started lowering. Eyes started meeting. The photographer stopped moving. Even the music hesitated, unsure whether to keep playing or quietly disappear. A scandal was forming in real time. And then, like the room had been waiting for him without knowing it, Seok Jihoon walked in. He didn't hurry. He didn't announce himself. He simply arrived, and somehow that was louder than anything else that had happened all evening. Late 30s, moving like a man already in his 40s, calm, deliberate, every step placed like it was a decision. Black tailored suit with no flash, no excess. Sharp jaw. Dark eyes that didn't scan the room so much as process it, the way a person looks at a chessboard and already knows 4 moves ahead. One watch on his wrist, nothing more. People straightened as he passed, not because anyone told them to, because something in their body understood before their minds could catch up. Kwon Tae-sik followed 2 steps behind, broad-shouldered, silent, wearing a discreet earpiece and an expression that said don't test what you're not prepared for. He wasn't a bodyguard in the obvious sense. He was more like a warning. Jihoon took in the empty chair, the panicked coordinator, the cracking composure of the room, and understood it all in seconds. His gaze moved past the socialites performing calm, past the guests pretending not to stare, past the people who wanted to be seen by him. And stopped. Not on the host, not on the influencers, not on Yoon Seorin near the champagne display, who stood poised and polished, smile assembled like a weapon, clearly expecting him to look. His eyes landed on Amara Sade. The black single mother sitting alone at the table, no one wanted. He looked at her for exactly 2 seconds. Then he walked toward her. The room noticed, whispers pivoted, heads turned. Someone lowered their glass. Seorin's smile didn't move, but something behind her eyes went sharp and still. Jihoon reached Amara's table and didn't sit. Standing gave him the angle, the quiet pressure, the authority of a man used to agreement before understanding. He placed a dark leather folder in front of her without asking permission, uncapped a pen with one smooth motion, and spoke in a voice so low it barely disturbed the air between them. 30 days, he said. Contract, you play my bride. Name your number, I'll double it. No mistakes. Amara stared at the folder, then at him. She had come to stay invisible, earn her pay, and go home to her daughter. And somehow the most dangerous man in the room had just made her the most visible woman in it. "I don't know you," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "You will," he replied, calm as a closed door. "You appear where I need you to appear. You say what the situation requires. You ask nothing about my business, and I ask nothing about yours. What happens if I say no?" Jihoon didn't blink. "Then I find another solution." A pause. "But I chose you." No flattery, no warmth, like a fact he'd already calculated. T6 stood behind him with hands folded and eyes on the room. Not on Amara, technically. But she felt watched anyway, measured, filed away. "The terms are inside," Jihoon said. "Page 2. Amara opened it. The number at the top made her breath catch. The conditions below made her stomach tighten. No deviation from agreed public appearances. No independent communication with associated parties. Full compliance with image requirements for contract duration. A clause that looked clean on paper and heavy in real life. While she read, Jihoon reached into his jacket and placed a ring on the open page. Small, elegant, chosen to look real. The room that had spent all evening looking through her was now looking directly at her. No time to think, no space to breathe. Just the ring, the folder, and Jihoon's calm, waiting eyes. She signed. Not because fear disappeared. Because the fear of going home empty-handed was older and heavier than the fear standing across from her in a tailored suit. Amara told herself it was temporary. 30 days had a finish line. She could see it. She survived worse things with no finish line at all. By the following evening, she stood in a penthouse that didn't belong to her, holding a room key she hadn't asked for, in a dress that had been selected and delivered before she'd even confirmed her size. That unsettled her most. Not the marble floors, not the wall of windows stacking the city like a display, not even the security detail that materialized when she moved between rooms. It was the dress. The fact that someone had already decided what she would wear before she'd had the chance to decide anything herself. Jihoon didn't call them rules. He called them expectations, which somehow felt worse. 2 engagements per week minimum. Stay within the agreed social perimeter. Don't speak about the arrangement to anyone outside the circle. Don't contact the wedding party without clearance. And above all, do not look uncertain in public. At the first appearance, standing outside a private function while the city moved indifferently below, T6 stepped beside her. He didn't look at her. Eyes forward. Voice low. "They'll be watching how you carry yourself tonight," he said. "Any hesitation reads as guilt." Amara kept her gaze forward too. "And smile," T6 added quietly. "A beat. Or by the end of the night, they won't blame him for whatever goes wrong." He didn't finish. He didn't need to. Yoon Seorin found Amara by the floral display. Not as an ambush. Ambushes were obvious. Seorin simply appeared at her side the way expensive perfume appears in a room, present before it registers, impossible to ignore once it does. "You must be Amara," Seorin said, warmth poured perfectly into every syllable. "I've heard so much. I'm so glad he finally brought someone." Amara returned the smile, she saved for situations that required caution, dressed as kindness. "It's a beautiful evening." "Isn't it always with this crowd?" Seorin lifted her champagne glass in a small, elegant gesture, ivory blazer, champagne dress, not a thread out of place. "How long have you two known each other?" There it was. The first probe, casual as a scalpel. "Long enough," Amara said. Seorin's smile didn't flicker. "Of course, he's very private. I admire that." She tilted her head slightly. "You seem calm for someone in your position. Most women get nervous around this circle." "Your position." Amara filed that phrase away. "No," Amara said softly. "Nervous isn't my thing." Seorin studied her, not rudely, but thoroughly, the way someone reads a document they've already been briefed on. Then Seorin's voice dropped, sweet as sugar and just as dangerous. 30 days goes faster than people expect. The number landed like a stone in still water. Amara didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't give Seorin a ripple to read. Behind Seorin's smile was a certainty that made Amara's stomach go cold. Seorin already knew. She had always known. And she was deciding what to do with it. Amara found Jihoon on a private terrace later, alone, city glittering below. "She knows," Amara said, no preamble. "Yes," Jihoon replied, as if it was weather. "You knew she'd know." Jihoon turned then, and something about his expression made the truth sharper. His eyes weren't cold. They were controlled. Controlled meant something was happening underneath that he'd decided she wouldn't see. "Seorin has been inside this circle for 3 years," he said. "She moves through trust like water through sand. By the time anyone feels it, the damage is already done." He paused. The empty chair at the wedding wasn't an accident. It was a message, sent by someone with access, someone protected by proximity. Amara felt understanding settle slowly, like cold. "You needed someone outside the circle," she said. "Someone they'd underestimate." Jihoon's voice remained low, even. "Someone with no obvious connection to me, someone invisible enough to make them comfortable." The word invisible landed differently now. "I was never just the contract bride," Amara said. "No." She held his gaze. "I was bait." Jihoon didn't flinch from the word. He gave her the respect of letting it stand between them, clean and undecorated. "Yes." Amara exhaled slowly, the thought of Zoe pressing behind her ribs like a warning. "If they can't get to you through the circle," she said, "they go through me." Jihoon's calm didn't change. "They already decided that," he said quietly, "days ago." Amara understood then what the contract truly was. Not protection. Positioning. Clause 7 wasn't about looking perfect. It was about becoming useful, becoming a diversion, a redirect, a living distraction when the room needed to look one way while something else happened quietly in another. The instruction came through Tisik 40 minutes before the next function. Clipped, precise, no room for questions. Approach a specific guest, deliver a specific envelope, say nothing, return to position. Amara stared at the envelope in her hands for a long moment. "What's in it?" she asked. "Your job is delivery," Tisik answered, "not questions." Amara thought about Zoe, about the finish line, about how close the finish line was and how heavy the danger felt. Then she delivered the envelope. She found out what was inside it when the guest opened it publicly, loudly, with an expression that turned the room into a courtroom. The contents looked like an accusation. And the man receiving them looked across the floor and found Amara immediately, deliberately, like he'd been told exactly where to look. "Her," he said, just that word, loud enough. The room shifted. Heads turned, glasses lowered, conversations died mid-sentence. Phones came up, not all, but enough. Enough to make Amara feel exposed like skin under bright light. She stood alone in the center of the floor with no context and no explanation, nothing but the space between her and everyone else filling with suspicion. 2 security personnel near the entrance began moving in her direction. Slowly, deliberately. And from across the room, Yoon Seorin watched with a champagne glass raised to her lips. And smiled. Seorin moved first, of course she did. Composed, unhurried, perfectly timed. "I hate to say it," Seorin said, voice carrying just enough to land in the ears that mattered. "But I've had questions about her from the beginning. I didn't want to be the one to raise them. I should have." The room leaned in. Rooms always leaned in. Amara held still, not frozen, but still. She kept her hands relaxed, kept her chin level. She let Seorin talk because interrupting a lie before it finishes sometimes makes the lie look like truth. Then Jihoon appeared at the edge of the room. He didn't rush. He didn't shout. He walked to the center with the same deliberate calm he carried everywhere, accepted a thinner folder from Tisik, and opened it without theatrics. He spoke to the host directly, quietly, Less than 90 seconds. Whatever was in that folder, the host's expression moved through skepticism, recognition, then the discomfort of someone powerful realizing they'd been standing on the wrong side of a plan. Security stopped. Phones lowered. The room's current shifted. Seoran's composure held almost. Her eyes flicked once toward the folder, too fast to be polite. And in that flicker, the mask cracked. Seoran looked at Amara with eyes that abandoned warmth completely. "You won tonight," Seoran said softly, only for Amara. "But I know something about you that isn't in his folder." Then she walked away, leaving the words behind like a promise. Amara waited until they were back at the penthouse. Not because she needed to compose herself. She'd been composed through the exposure, through the suspicion, through being turned into a story in a room full of people hungry for someone to blame. She waited because what she had to say deserved a room without an audience. Jihoon stood at the window when she found him, city glittering below. He turned like he'd been expecting this conversation, longer than she'd been preparing for it. "You put me in the center of that room without full information," Amara said. "You used Clause 7 knowing what it would look like, knowing I'd take the exposure alone." Jihoon didn't interrupt. "That's not a contract," she continued. "That's a position, and I'm not a position." Silence held long enough to mean something. Then Jihoon placed the contract copy on the table and set his pen beside it. "What terms do you want revised?" he asked, and it wasn't a challenge. It was a door. From the doorway, Seok watched. Then, with a small nod at nothing in particular, he stepped back into the corridor and pulled the door quietly behind him. Amara picked up the pen. She crossed out Clause 7, crossed out the clause that restricted her movement, added 3 lines of her own in the margin, clear and unambiguous, terms that said she would not be used as a diversion without full context, that her safety would be prioritized, that her dignity would not be negotiated. Jihoon read, then signed below without bargaining. 28 days were done. 2 remained. But Seoran's parting words still sat in the room like a stone that hadn't stopped rolling. Consequences didn't wait for contracts to expire. The 30 days ended on a Tuesday. No ceremony, no formal conclusion. Amara woke up, made Zoe's breakfast, fixed the loose button on her school cardigan, and walked her to the corner the way she did every morning, one hand warm in hers, the other carrying everything a mother carries that nobody ever sees. Zoe looked up at her on the way back. "You seem different," she said, with the unfiltered accuracy only children have. Amara thought about it honestly. "I think I am," she said. She'd gone into that wedding invisible and come out of it framed, used, exposed, doubted, and tested in a room full of people who decided her worth before she ever spoke. She signed a contract under pressure, followed rules that felt like walls, and stood alone while phones rose around her like a quiet verdict. And she was still here. Revised terms, intact. Because the shame Seoran tried to pour over her wasn't permanent. It was a weapon. And weapons only land if the target helps carry them. Amara had put it down. Surviving something difficult wasn't the same as being diminished by it. The choices made under pressure, signing that contract, walking into rooms she didn't belong in, protecting her daughter with the only options available that night, weren't confessions. They were evidence. Evidence of a woman who kept moving when standing still would have cost her everything. Help that comes with chains isn't help, boundaries aren't attitude, and dignity isn't what the room decides about a person. It's what a person refuses to surrender when the room turns. Jihoon learned restraint. Seok stood down. Seoran's last move was still out there, unresolved and patient. But so was Amara. And Zoe, holding her hand on an ordinary Tuesday morning, saw her mother walk through something impossible and come home. That was the lesson that mattered most. Not the contract, not the money, not the man. The mother her daughter would remember. If you were Amara, would you have signed the 30-day deal? Comment yes or no, and tell why. Because that answer usually says more about what someone has survived than what they would choose.